What is up, tribe? Welcome back to Hustle and Thrive. I am Shae Perkins, joined by Mr.
Julian Fraser.
And today we have a hot and juicy topic for you. But first, we're going to have some casual talk. I think this is going to be a thing we're going to have.
We're gonna try to incorporate a little bit of casual conversation before we jump into a few of these topics. And
Yeah. I want to give you all the personality.
For sure.
Julian, do you have a good joke for us? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh wow, good joke.
It can be a bad joke. It doesn't matter.
I do kind of have a good joke.
Okay.
And it involves the nope, I don't.
Not a good one.
I was gonna try to refer to the World Cup and how some good teams are losing, and some teams that are not on the map are winning, and you know how Germany's performance might have been a joke, or how the Netherlands, Italy, and the United States not even being in the World Cup is kind of a joke. So I was gonna go down that route, but I was not fast enough.
Yesterday at work, so my boss is English and my coworkers are Colombian, and they went against each other, and it was a very tight game.
It was 1-1, and with the PKs, remember
that?
that?
Yeah, they were freaking out at work yesterday. It was crazy. There was not a lot of stuff done yesterday.
It got violent. Things got violent there.
Are you rooting for a particular team?
Well, I mean, always United States when they're in it, but they weren't this time. So I was going for Spain for a while, but now they're out. My default was France for a while because I really liked a certain player. His name's Thierry Henry. He's retired now, but he was French, so I'd root for French as a close secondary and now tertiary.
Was he good, or what was it about him?
Oh yeah, well he played for Arsenal and he was probably like one of the best of his generation. So he played for Arsenal for a long time and then came and played on the New York Red Bulls or whatever. And yeah, I guess I have to vote for the French now because they're the only ones that are still in it. At this point, we'll see what happens.
Good times. You've been playing soccer lately? I know you play recreationally. Are you playing right now?
I'm not playing right now, no. When I came out to grad school, I played on the club team, and that was competitive, but it was a huge time sink, and grad school itself is a time sink, so I did that for 2 years, and that was fun for it to be like half competitive, half fun, and then I think I've kind of put that on the back burner, kind of retired my shoes for the time being. Yeah, focusing on this whole parkour thing, which is been really fun. So
nice.
Yeah. But how about yourself? I know that parkour is like kind of your main thing. What else is on your radar? What else do you do with your time besides work and parkour?
Besides work and parkour,
is that a hard question?
That actually might be. That might be it. What else do I do? I have a rabbit, but I talked about that in the last podcast.
Okay.
His name's Bean. We can do another visualization.
Okay,
we can do that. He's black and he's white, and that's about it.
Incredible.
He's funky. Oh.
So you're hearing it first, tribe, that Shae's incredibly well-rounded.
Very well-rounded. I make money and I jump on things.
Is there anything else that you're wanting to incorporate into your life that you haven't yet, or that kind of on the horizon that?
Yes, I turned 26 pretty recently, and it was kind of like, I didn't even expect it. It was just like, oh, I'm 26.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was, what's today? July 4th?
Mm-hmm.
It was June 12th, so a month ago-ish, less.
We're really good at dating our cast.
Yeah.
We don't release for like another year, and it's like July 4th, 2019. And
it's like, it's from the future. But, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. 26 kind of hit that like quarter life crisis where I was like, I need to do something. So I panicked. I moved into apartments, got a roommate, got a rabbit. And now I'm kind of thinking about a longer career, and, you know, I'm juggling if I want to go back to coaching gymnastics or if I want to get into something more serious or even go back to school. Yeah. But yeah, just adult stuff.
Nothing cool.
Really.
So try to just dabbling into that whole adult territory, and I think that quarter life crisis might be a fun topic for the future.
Yes, if quarter life crisis, that is a good point.
It is. Yeah,
that'd be a good one.
I think it's a lot of things that millennials and even Gen Xers, as they age, are running up against. As the midlife crisis has been accelerated a little bit. So
yeah, that'd be cool. I feel like maybe most of our listeners are within 5-10 years of that.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications, and send us your social security number and date of birth to your email if you want us to do an episode on quarter life crisis and all other kinds of things existential. But I'm wondering, Shae, we had chatted a little bit about what a good topic for this entire cast would be. What were some things we were throwing around?
So, I was thinking kind of on the topic of mobility, kind of what it is, how to apply it, is it important? I find the biggest issue with mobility is people do not know what it is.
Yeah.
They don't apply it right, and they're leaving a lot of performance on the table. And not even just performance, just like they're living their life in pain when they don't have to.
Interesting, yeah.
So, and I've studied a lot on the topic. I have so I feel like I have a good amount to talk about.
Yeah.
For once.
So when we think about the physical fitness paradigm, we do automatically think about cardio and lifting weights, but there's this whole spectrum of mobility that we need to take into consideration. So you're right. I wouldn't know really how to define what is in the big package of mobility. What are some things that you include when you think about mobility or when you're teaching it to others in your role as a coach?
So how I would kind of define it is mobility is your ability to get into safe, sound, effective positions in sport. So a really simple example is most people would know that doing a deadlift or picking something up off the ground with a rounded back is not a good position.
Right.
And it could be a question of a lot of things, either technique or even mobility, but a better position would be to pick it up with maybe a straight back and try to use your legs a little more.
Right.
So mobility, having requisite mobility would be the ability to get into the position of that good deadlift.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
maybe we're talking about something like, the enough hamstring flexibility to be able to get in that tight shape. So that's kind of an example / definition of it. And kind of the scope of this podcast is I would like to just, at the very least, get people to be aware that mobility is a thing and how to just simply start doing maybe even just like 10 minutes a day to get themselves out of pain and maybe even gain a lot of performance.
Right. And you brought that paradigm of pain up, which is really important for a lot of folks because chronic pain, it's one of the most common symptoms of everything from, physical illness, medical diseases to overworking, overloading, and even just injury. So, what are some things that if I'm not an athlete even that I can start incorporating into my life, maybe generally, and then you can speak more specifically on?
Yeah. We can definitely start there. So with the non-athlete or maybe with somebody who's more sedentary, you're probably spending a lot of time sitting. And if you kind of take into consideration the theory of like you get good at what you train at, you're spending a lot of time training the ability to sit, which is like these very closed angles, very kyphosis, rounded forwards, closed hip.
Right.
And then if you go to do something else, you're not good at that because you spend all your time sitting. So then your body compensates and you snap everything. And basically what's going to happen is if you spend a lot of time sitting, you're probably going to have things like, back pain and neck pain. And just the simple thought of being conscious of, sitting too much might be an issue can really help a lot of people.
Wow. That was an interesting way that you put it, that if you're training is like something that you do most regularly, and if you're sitting most regularly, then you're training to sit. And I've never really thought about that because when we think about sitting down, we're like, that's like a resting position, right? Not something that I'm like actively developing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in that way that we're like developing sedentary behavior. Like
I don't think your body knows the difference. Like whatever you do, it just like gets good at.
It gets really good at sitting, and then
you're so good at sitting. Your hips are tight, and you're really good at being rounded forward, but you're not good at much else. And then when you try to be a normal human and walk around, or God forbid lift weights or do something athletic, you're just gonna break in half.
So it sounds disastrous. So there's some things that I've definitely seen some trends about, sitting on a Bosu ball or having standing debt. Like, are those things that are helpful in your experience, like ergonomic sort of things like that, or what?
Well, for sure. The issue with sitting isn't so much that sitting is an issue. It's just that we do it so much typically that it becomes very, very over patterned, and then it kind of becomes like a toxic thing that we've done way too much of.
Okay.
So, sure, something like a Bosu ball could be a slightly different pattern that might help you get a little bit of extra movement. Maybe even like a standing desk might be good too. There's definitely a lot of alternatives, but really the body is designed to be in a state of constant movement. And if you're getting a lot of healthy movement throughout the day, mobility restrictions from an over patterning, such as sitting all the time, would probably not be as big of an issue.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's maybe start, if you don't mind, talking about someone who is sort of active, who is on the more athletic spectrum, who's either the weekend warrior training for a half marathon or in a recreational competitive league or something like that. And I'm looking to like continue to improve, and I'm looking to mobility as a way of improving. What are some things that maybe I should be thinking about in terms of improving mobility if I'm already working on strength, I'm already working on cardio and things like that?
For sure, I think the first place to start is that, I mean, it's definitely more of a topic now, but a lot of the, I guess, athletic community that's going to the gym or doing some sports like that, they're just kind of unaware that mobility is even a topic. The most they'll think about it is like, yeah, I just like touch my toes and I stretch my arms out before I start working out, and I'm good, I'm warm. That's it, right? But what I kind of think about is that every movement we do has a perfectly sound position we can do it in. So the example of the deadlift, a straight back and trying to use our legs is that good position. And if we're lacking mobility, we might have to get into a very gross compensated position that'll break some stuff. Now that extrapolates out to every movement, from the bench press to throwing a ball to sprinting to everything. And it has a position. And if we can just start thinking of our movements as positions rather than just this arbitrary thing I do with my body, then we can think about getting into a better position, not compensating and potentially not injuring ourselves as much.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's like an ideal stance for different ranges of motion, for different tasks, and we should be, in one way or another, trying to align ourselves with that stance or that position, like you were saying?
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's basically what I'm getting at. And really the first step is just being aware that is even a concept. There's a technique for everything, and there can always be a better technique for us. So I guess a more working model of it is maybe identify some positions that are ones you experience pain in, ones you cannot get into the quote-unquote good technical position in, and you can start thinking about different techniques you can do to open your body up and be able to get into those positions more effortlessly.
Yeah, and as you're explaining this, it sounds like kind of advice that would work for even out of athletics as well. For what I'm thinking of, like occupational wellness stuff, where the angle of my hands when I'm typing is giving me arthritis, right, or something like that. That there's still an ideal position that I should be looking.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To try to fulfill in order to decrease pain. So in some ways, that's still generalizable. I mean, I'm thinking of things like posture, flexibility, stretching. Like, to what degree should would you suggest? It probably depends on an athlete. But how do you suggest people being incorporating things like stretching into their lives, or are there specific motions for mobility?
Honestly, it's a lot more simple than most people would think.
Okay.
They're imagining an hour of sitting on a foam roller and doing some weird thing with the band. But honestly, I have made substantial gains, and the quota kind of is like 10 minutes a day of focused mobility work can make a huge difference in just kind of like warding away some really easy injuries to not have to suffer.
Okay.
So I guess maybe we should get into like some common defects and then kind of how to get into a better position, or what are you thinking?
Sure. I mean, that sounds valuable to me, is thinking of like, what are the most common things that I can be thinking about avoiding, and how to do that. So yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Right. So we can go back to the sitting kind of thing. Sitting is going to keep your hips in a very shortened motion. So when you go to fully extend them, like when you're standing up, they're not going to have the ability to fully extend. So the next best thing we can do is arch our back. Now, we would all imagine that walking around in a constant state of an arched back eventually will be some pain, and lo and behold, most people in America, which is a very sedentary country, have back pain.
Okay.
So kind of taking a step back, what if we were able to do something to open up our hips to a certain degree? And there's a lot of techniques. You've got stretches, you got stretches like in a lunge position. You can put a foam roller on it. You can put a lacrosse ball on it. You can do stuff with a band to kind of like open it up. But there's definitely an amount of work you can do to undo that tight position you've gotten really good at and get into a better position.
Okay. Yeah. How long would I be looking at if I was one of those sedentary folks, who maybe my hamstring is less elastic and a little bit shorter than it should be, but I want to try to fix that? How long would I be looking at kind of having a 10-minute, 15-minute stretching routine in one way or another before I was start to see some relief, either in symptoms, or I started to see a little bit better range of motion?
If you know what you're doing and you're very guided and focused in what you're in your mobility session, you can literally see drastic improvements in like 1 10-minute session. It's really not as complicated as most people think it is.
Interesting.
Honestly, so you're kind of like what I kind of do as a model is I pick like 2 different exercises or mobility kind of movements for a certain muscle group, and I kind of superset them. I go back and forth. So let's say I was doing I wanted to open up my hips, and we're talking about a stretch, which would be like maybe a lunge position, and then I'll superset it with like maybe putting a foam roll on it, and I'll go back and forth like 2 or 3 times, and literally within 10 minutes, my back starts feeling better, my hips are more open, and it feels really awesome. I want to make it clear that it's not as hard as people think it is. It's not as crazy as people think it is. It's just like consistent, dedicated, focused work over a long period of time.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out to me as you were describing this is that you described it using the word exercise, right? And I think a lot of people do have that mentality, I mean, myself included, that stretching and foam rolling, right? They're not a part of the exercise. They're part of the warm up or the cool down. So I think when I think exercise, I think of like doing something on a treadmill or running or biking or lifting weights and like throwing things around. But I don't associate changing my posture or doing a lunge for a stretch or foam roll, those sorts of things, as exercise, which is really interesting. And I wonder if there's other people listening who might have not had that association either.
Yeah, for sure. And, kind of the theme of our podcast in general is to kind of reframe the concept of fitness. And then it's a lot more than just like throwing in heavy things and doing bench presses and having biceps. There's a lot more to it. This, of course, is more on the physical side, but I consider my ability to be in a good position as part of my physical attributes, just like I would consider my strength, my power, my endurance, my stamina and agility and all that kind of stuff. I have a separate kind of focused period of time where I work on my ability to get into good positions. Okay. For sure.
Yeah. And you said, if you know what you're doing, you can probably see some immediate returns on stretching and those sorts of things. What if I don't know what I'm doing? Should I join a yoga class? Do I need a personal trainer? Like, what's even the first step for me if I don't know where to start with this whole stretching thing?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I have to say most of my working knowledge, it stems from a guy named Dr. Kelly Starrett.
Okay.
He's kind of like the mobility guy. He's got that book, The Supple Leopard. I'm sure most of us have heard of it. He's got a couple other books like called Deathbound and Born to Run and stuff. And he's kind of the guy that has a lot of good information. So if you can check out any of his work, I think his YouTube is mobilitywod.com. He's also got a paid subscription website as well for some more in-depth stuff.
Gotcha.
But that is an awesome place to start. And he breaks things down super simple. Like the videos are like, your ankle hurts? Do this. And you're like, wow, my ankle feels way better. This guy's so smart.
Man, I'm immediately thinking that there's a few things that I'm like, I wonder if I should visit this YouTube channel. But that's a great resource. And I mean, beyond just like little name dropping action is saying like, yeah, I was thinking too, like, should we put some like pictures of stretches? But it sounds like that's a good resource.
Yeah, that's an amazing resource. There's some other sources that I use that I've kind of like started to use outside of Kelly Starrett stuff and Mobility Wad, but that is an amazing place to start. It is like that. He has worked with like NFL, NBA, baseball, every single sport you could possibly think of. He's worked with the highest level athletes, and across the board, people like cannot get enough of him. He improves performance, and yeah, it's a super great source. For
sure.
But another distinction I want to make before we get too far,
please,
is the difference between flexibility and mobility.
Right, because I pulled us down the path of stretching, and I was going to say, does mobility kind of include other things than getting good stretches or foam rolling? Like, but please.
Yeah. So it's like it's one of those things where mobility is kind of defined as the ability to get into a good position. So mobility work would be practicing those positions in a bunch of different ways, and stretching is absolutely included. But when I think of the word flexibility, what I'm kind of thinking is flexibility for the sake of flexibility, like doing the middle splits. Like there is no reason in most performance situations to be able to do the middle splits. It's not really a thing. It's more of like, I want to do the middle splits for the sake of doing the middle splits. I want to be able to do a back bend for the sake of doing a back bend. Of course, some sports like gymnastics and dance require it.
Right.
But if we're talking the typical baseball, football, track, stuff like that, you don't need the middle splits.
Yeah.
It's kind of a for the sake of itself. So when I think people talking about flexibility, they're just arbitrarily doing things. They just touch their toes for a bit. They pull their arm across their chest. They just do this kind of random stuff. In a focused way, those things are really, really good techniques.
Right.
But I just want to make it clear that it's not this arbitrary, like, oh, like I listen to the podcast, I got to touch my toes for 10 minutes and I can suddenly do things better. Like, that's not what I'm getting at for sure.
No, that's a good distinction too, because you're right. There's a lot of times where I'm stretching and it's part of my warm up or my cool down, and I am kind of doing it arbitrarily. Like I know more or less which parts of the body that I'm stretching and which muscle groups I'm putting some tension into, but it's not super intentional. It's not as purposeful as I'm stretching because I want it to help aid me in being in a certain position. It's just like, oh, well, I'm supposed to touch my toes, right?
Right, and I'm warm and I'm good to go.
Yeah, so that's a really good distinction. So how then do we continue to progress this idea of mobility as it applies to our lives?
Right. Okay. So how I kind of work it is it's a super simple process. If I have pain in an area, and I'll just use myself for example, my right knee hurts all the time, and I know that it hurts in flexion, or i.e. in the bottom of a squat. So I try to do mobility exercises that kind of sort of look like the bottom of the squat. So certain stretches, certain things with the foam roller, certain things with the lacrosse ball, maybe a band, maybe like some compression that would help open up the tissues, make them more healthy, make them more supple, so that the bottom of the squat doesn't hurt anymore. So my knee stops hurting.
Right.
So so let's say my knee hurts.
Right.
I'm going to pick 2 or 3 exercises that look like the bottom of the squat. We'll take something like a lunge stretch. We'll do one where we put a heavy dumbbell on our quad to kind of like smash out the area. And I'll take a third one that's maybe like where you can take a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, jam it up in the crook of your knee and close your knee on it really hard, and that kind of gives you some slack of the knee joint.
Right.
And I'll rotate those 2 or 3 times. I hit the 10 to 15 minute mark and I'm done. It's not really more complicated than that.
Right.
And that applied consistently every day over a long period of time, you'll suddenly be like, wow, that pain I had for the longest time that I thought was just associated with movement, I don't have anymore. A funny thing is people kind of think that athletics just comes with pain. You're just always in pain. Absolutely. But the body's natural state is not pain.
Right.
There is a way to not be in pain, and that is crazy to some people.
I was thinking about that myself, was that a lot of people when we experience pain, like my first thought is like, especially if there's some performance aspect that I need to not be in pain for, is just reach for some vitamin I, right? It's just like, get some ibuprofen in my system, numb it out, ignore it, like find a way to push through it, and I'll heal when I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. But it sounds like in this way, we kind of listen to the pain, we listen to our body as a way of sort of guiding our decisions of how to be flexible, of how to roll out, of how to incorporate mobility into part of that healing process. And I think that's really cool too, is thinking of even pain differently than we normally have a relationship with it. So that's really cool.
That is definitely something people don't even think about. They're just like, sports are tough, so I got to be tough. Pain's part of the game. Whatever, There's whatever. I just do it. Coach tells me and I do it.
Right, absolutely. And if one ibuprofen doesn't work, then 2 and 4, and we just go from there.
Yeah, ibuprofen is actually a really interesting piece of the pain kind of mobility movement spectrum, because it numbs the pain.
Right.
Pain's there for a reason. If it's numb, you're just injuring yourself more because you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And also there's some aspects of it that it kind of like it can prohibit the inflammatory response, and it can actually make the injury take longer to heal.
Right.
And then when it does heal, your body isn't as structurally sound as it was before.
Interesting, yeah.
Not going off on the ibuprofen thing, but that actually is a
No,
interesting
for
piece of
sure.
it.
And I think that's like a cool, a good rabbit hole to go down, because I often think of ibuprofen because it's an anti-inflammatory. So if I'm feeling inflamed or injured, I think, and it's a blood thinner. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a muscle relaxer. All these things that I can sort of use to get that immediate relief. But it sounds like in some cases, that immediate relief comes at the cost of some sort of long-term mobility.
Mobility. And I just kind of like to think of pain as like a friend in a way. Like if something hurts, it hurts for a reason, and you probably should pay attention to it.
Right.
If your neck has hurt for 5 years straight, that might be something you want to look at.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that analogy that you use, kind of pain as a friend and kind of cluing you in on something, is actually exactly the same metaphor that we would use in psychology when we're talking about negative emotions like anger or sadness or depression or those sorts of things. That in some ways the emotions are our subconscious ways of trying to like communicate that there is an unmet need. So I feel like psychological pain and physical pain might share that in common.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I kind of, general in my life, I like to use fear, and I kind of mean all negative emotions in general,
Right.
as a compass. If something scares me, upsets me, I need to pay attention to it, and I either need to face it or fix it for sure.
Yeah. So I think, you gave the kind of steps of kind of paying attention to your body and reacting to pain in such a way that you can use these different strategies, whether it's stretching, whether it's some sort of massage, foam roll, to use like increased mobility to address the pain. What if I'm just someone at home and I am convinced that I need to include mobility work in one way or another into my practice, into my routine? What's one easy way I can do it? Let's say that I'm not in pain, but I still want to get my mobility game up. I recognize I'm a little tight, a little inflexible.
Right, for sure. And again, this is an audio podcast, so I can't really example anything. I'm going to kind of redirect you to sources like Mobility Wad. But something as simple as like a lacrosse ball can be a really awesome tool to start. Basically, if you touch something on your body with moderate force and it feels tight and it hurts, it shouldn't hurt. And kind of, I'm like right now I'm poking myself and I poke myself in the chest. I'm like, oh, that's tight, that hurts. It shouldn't hurt. Your body should be very, very supple and almost like silk-like when you roll over the muscles. It shouldn't be knotty and kind of beef jerky-like. So anyways, taking a lacrosse ball or even a tennis ball if you're a little more sensitive and rolling out some in-pain areas, particular areas that might be a little tight, can go a long way. One that is just super easy and I think most of us have seen or at least tried is rolling out the bottom of your feet on a lacrosse ball. So in a typical sedentary life, your ankle's kind of going to be stuck in a 90-degree angle constantly. You're probably also wearing cushiony shoes with a heel that it might be too tight for your toes.
Nice plush socks.
You probably don't spend much time barefoot or doing anything with your toes. So the fascia and the muscles and everything down at the bottom of the foot become really, really tight. And that tightness and dysfunction there can actually travel upstream. You can start having knee problems, hip problems, and even back problems from just your feet being tight.
Yeah.
So spending, if we're working at like a, 5 to 10 minute increments, if you go back and forth on each foot for, 30 seconds to a minute, for 5 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes, you will be like, wow, all of a sudden my feet feel better and my knees stopped hurting and like I can stand up straight and all kinds of stuff like that. It really astounds people when they realize how simple it is. Stuff like that.
And it feels really good just to get a self foot massage.
There's a reason massages feel good. Another one is, we sit a lot and our glutes kind of spend a lot of time in this like lengthened, kind of like stretched out, not doing anything, kind of sedentary state. And sitting on a ball and rolling around and just kind of poking at your butt in the places that hurt can do a lot to get blood flow back in the area, kind of get some function back in there, get some, recovered a little bit so it's not all... I've heard the term pancake butt. If you sit too much, your butt turns into a pancake. I don't know if that's true.
That just sounds gross and something I want to avoid.
Sounds gross. I've heard it's like the fascia laminates it flat, so sitting on your butt gives you a pancake butt.
What?
I don't know if that's true. It sounds kind of funny though.
Ah, I wonder what waffle butt would be like.
Oh, gross! Like sitting in like a gridded like lawn chair for too long. That's gross.
Oh no! I'm sorry. I did that.
I don't like it at all.
Okay.
But yeah, lacrosse ball is a great place to start. And again, if something hurts when you touch it, put a lacrosse ball on it for a minute or two, and all of a sudden it doesn't hurt as much, and you can move a little better.
Yeah.
For sure. And I would just think if you're a non-active person, the main thing you're probably doing too much of is sitting. So just think about like what gets tight in that flex position and sitting, and put a ball on it. Put it up in there and get it all loose and stuff.
Oh boy, that's a great way that's a great note to end things on. So, I think I personally got a lot of things out of this conversation, and kind of revisiting how I think about mobility and flexibility and how to incorporate them into my routine, both training and just kind of going through day-to-day life. Definitely want to avoid pancake butt now that I know that's a big
Pancake butt.
Whew.
Hashtag pancake butt, man.
And so hopefully a few of you out there are reconsidering once again, which is kind of your definition of fitness, and that's kind of our goal, and how that should perhaps include some sort of mobility. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing a little bit of your expertise to the table and teaching us all something new.
For sure. I could probably just summarize, just to give them something to kind of leave on.
Absolutely.
If it hurts, it shouldn't hurt. Work on positions that make it not hurt. Try to get into better positions when you move, and you will experience a lot less pain, and honestly probably even have an increase in performance, and that's good for everybody.
There you go.
Cool. Well, I think that is it, Tribe. I've been Shae Perkins, and
I have been Julian Frazier.
we'll see you later. Bye,
This
guys.
has been Hustle and Tribe.